I've decided I want to make a tall fence for my table saw, something like that. A little concerned. The stock fence that comes with my vintage Craftsman Table saw is kind of low, kind of narrow. I think if I want to add a tall fence like so, probably going to have to make it a little wider. I looked around my shop. This is a piece of plywood from a shelving unit I salvaged a while back. It's got a hardwood cap on it, but it's a nice piece of plywood. It's very straight, very true. It's many years old, so I think that's going to be a good candidate for a good solid piece that's going to stay true. And I dug this out of my scrap pile. I don't know where it came from, but I know why I was attracted to it. Again, it's a piece of 3/4 inch plywood, and it's obviously fairly old. You can tell by the color, but it has stayed flat and it looks very true. So I think I have enough materials. So here are the pieces cut. This piece sits something like there. 2 pieces here. This one is below the level of that one. They'll be glued up so that that's flush. And that piece will sit like so. And I think down here that's going to be wide enough to provide a good base. It took me 2 shots to get it to this point. The first time I glued it and screwed it, this face wasn't parallel to this one, so it would rock when sitting on my table saw, and right now it's rock solid. It sits on the fence very nicely, slides easily, which was part of the design. It doesn't seem to have any real side-to-side play, at least not an appreciable amount. It's not quite perfectly plumb, but pretty close, maybe off by a millimeter up here around 6 inches high. Seems to be plumb back here, and I think that's good enough for most of the work that I need to do. So what I'd like to do is I have this 8-foot long piece of pine, and I'd like to rip it in half. And I'm going to use a narrow curved blade in the table saw. This is about a 1/16 of an inch. This board is a little more than 3/4 of an inch thick. I should end up with 2 boards that are nearly 3/8 of an inch thick, which is what I'm looking for. I only need 1 clean face, which I have from the factory, on each board, so the middle where the saw kerf is doesn't have to be perfectly clean, but I want it to be as good as I can get it. So I finally set the jig up to use it, and I discovered that this corner was shallow, and I had to run the whole jig against the fence to cut a kerf parallel to the fence, and the saw blade can't hit the upper parts, so I'm using my hand planes to get this smooth. And it was only out by about a 32nd of an inch, but I didn't feel as though that was quite good enough to give me what I was looking for. So I used my number 5 and number 7 to flatten it. And the good news is that it is very square to the top of the table saw, and it seems parallel when I measure it with the marking gauge. Unfortunately, I have a couple voids in the plywood. I took the outer layer of veneer clean off, and I'm at the inner layers, and there's a couple voids. I think this is good enough to use. Well, here it is all finished up, and I'm quite pleased with it. I'm currently working on the videos where I show how I resawed these boards. They started out full thickness, and I was able to cut them in half successfully. This worked very well. Once I started actually thinking about making the cut, I realized that the short side of the fence was really all that I needed. And that's when I realized that this wasn't quite as true as I wanted, and I had to reface this, and that came out fine. But it slides when I need it to, it locks down with the knobs, and it's reversible. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with the tall fence here, but I figured taller was better than not. I can always trim it down should need be. But I know using the side of the fence was very useful. And as always, I appreciate all of you coming by, checking out my projects, sharing my videos. If you have any questions, comments, I'd love to hear them. Thanks again, and I look forward to checking you guys all out on the next one.